More than 1.3 million cars made in Europe were sold in the United States in 2024. Of that 1.3 million, or just over that number, around 445,000, well, actually to be exact, 445,400 cars were made in Germany. However, the average sales price of those cars made in Germany was double the average sales price of other cars that were sold in America from other European countries. Now, here are the numbers. The average German car sold in America last year was worth $60,000, much higher than the average imported car average price. The United States is a major importer of cars, with total car imports reaching 7.7 million in 2024, with a combined value of 220 billion. And now it's saying, we want our money. When it comes to a value number, around 25% of all the value created from the cars sold in America last year, the imported cars, came from Europe. And that's a hell of a lot of money. Pot kettle black. Europe's automotive industry has slammed Donald Trump and his tariffs on European-made cars, claiming it's a disgrace, it's incredibly unfair, which is unbelievable considering this is coming from Europe, who've been doing this to other countries. And here's what they had to say, which in my opinion is unbelievably childish. To be honest, I'm sorry, if you live in Europe and you're watching the channel, I'm not meaning you personally, but in general, the way that Europe is reacting to this reminds me of, it honestly reminds me of people who just don't like to take personal responsibility for their own actions. They like to blame other people for the situation they're in instead of taking responsibility for themselves. And it's like someone who sometimes, my youngest boy, Cal, he really kind of tries to rile up my older boy, Jack. And Cal will hit Jack a few times and Jack will eventually smack him back. And then Cal will start crying. And I'll say, Cal, you hit him 3 times, mate. What did you expect him to do? He's going to react back to you. It's kind of like this is what Europe's doing to the United States. The United States goes, hang on a minute. You've been hitting us in the face for 10 years. All right, now we're going to hit you back. And Europe's like, in my opinion, it's no different to the way my little 8-year-old acts. And he's 8 years old. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. And I was just thinking in my mind, and I was saying who I was. I was thinking, people are going to react very emotionally to my comments here. I understand that because human beings are very emotional creatures. We absolutely all are. We like to think of ourselves as not being, but we are. But just try to take the emotion out of it and just think completely objectively about what I'm saying here. Europe is up in arms. They're screaming, they're crying, they're moaning, they're gnashing their teeth. I'm serious. They really are. The media is just having an absolute field day. Everyone's in fear, in panic. Europe's automotive industry is already being destroyed by China. So they protected themselves against this and they put massive tariffs on Chinese-made cars. The Chinese were not happy about it, of course, and they did complain. China didn't go mental like Europe has, but they definitely did complain. They tried their hardest to try and prevent it from happening. Well, maybe not their hardest, but they did try to some degree to prevent it from happening. But Europe went ahead and did this. And as a result, Chinese car manufacturers, some of them are building car factories in Europe and trying to find ways to get around the tariffs. However, in the case of the United States, well, Europe charges tariffs on all cars made outside of Europe. So it doesn't matter where you make them, whatever country it is, you've got to pay a 10% tariff. And of course, if it's China, the tariffs are much, much higher, much higher than 10%. You've got to pay the 10% tariff, but you've got to pay an additional tariff on top of that, depending on what car brand you are. So if you're not China, the tariff is 10%, meaning if you're General Motors, if you're Ford, if you're Toyota, whoever it may be, Japan, the United States, it's usually around 10% for every car company. Now, Europe's been all fine and dandy with this. Why have they been doing this? To protect their own automotive industry. They think that's reasonable. They've been doing this for a very long time. America has not. The United States has not been charging Germans or the French or Austria or Hungary, wherever cars, Slovakia, wherever all these car places are made, Spain, they all have a lot of a car presence, even the UK, hasn't been charging them. It hasn't been charging them anything to send their cars to America, which in my opinion is very strange. Basically, every single year, Europe has been slapping America in the face with a 10% tariff It is a slap because America hasn't charged them back, right? This is not free trade. Europe claims this is free trade. This is what their media are all saying today. It's free trade. We signed a free trade agreement. This is unfair. Uh, Hang on a minute. You haven't actually lived by your free trade agreement. You never actually abided by that. So now Donald Trump put a 25% tariff on European cars. This is huge. It is the Trump administration knows this is going to be a crisis for the European automotive industry. A huge amount of money over the last few weeks has flowed out of US stocks and bonds, and it's moved into European markets. Fund managers, we're talking billion-dollar funds, have moved historic levels of money over the last few weeks, which was a critical, huge error. Now we're going to find a lot of those stocks will have gone down significantly. Think about this. Germany, bankruptcies in Germany have gone to their highest level over the last few months that we've seen in decades. In decades. There is, and not even just bankruptcies. We're talking companies that are just firing staff by tens of thousands. And it's not just the automotive industry. It's all manufacturing sectors. So now Europe is in a major crisis. Porsche needs to sell cars they make in Germany and sell them in America. That's huge for Porsche. What's Porsche going to do? Oh, we'll make a factory in America. How long is it going to take you to build that factory? A couple of years. What about Audi? Audi don't make cars in America either. As Porsche, they need those sales. Audi and Porsche are both struggling enormously. And if your emotions tell you something different, look up the stats. I've done the videos. I've proven it to the audience. I've proven it to the world that Audi and Porsche are in a crisis. And they even say it themselves. So if you're a Porsche fan, my brother probably is not going to like hearing this. Porsche is in trouble, guys. Porsche is in big trouble. It's historically, 50% of Porsche's profits have come from China. Yeah, put the numbers together. Porsche in China is shrinking rapidly. Porsche are firing people. Porsche are turning the screws. And that's before this happened. Now, yes, Porsche can continue selling cars in America. They can add this 25% tariff on top of the price. Will Americans still buy Porsches? Of course. Will they buy as many of them? No, of course not. Adding an extra 25% cost on top is going to mean a lot less people will buy a Porsche. How many less? I don't know, but it's definitely going to affect them. What about Audi? Well, Audi already say our profits are shrinking the fastest pace that they've ever shrunk before. Profits have declined enormously. Sales fell last year for Audi and Porsche. But Audi in particular will be hurt more than Porsche, because if you slap a 25% increase on the cost of all Audis in America, then that's going to be very hard for buyers to stomach. I'd say most people won't buy an Audi if they've got to pay 25% more. Some will. I'd say probably 90% would not. So Audi is going to be screwed for the next couple of years. Big problem here. The parent company of the Volkswagen Group, which obviously owns part of Porsche, Volkswagen themselves, they own a bunch of Audi, Skoda, Bentley, Lamborghini, etc. They're trying to dump off a lot of their stock as quickly as they can, quietly, because of this issue. But they didn't manage it in time. They didn't manage it fast enough. Now, by value, Europe is actually the biggest exporter of cars to the United States. Investment bank Jefferies calculated that European car makers in 2023 exported cars worth a total of $60 billion to the United States. That is miles ahead of second placed Canada at $28 billion. Industry Association ACEA said it was deeply concerned by the tariffs and called on the US and the European Union to find an immediate resolution to avoid a damaging trade war. It said that European automakers exported 50 to 60% of their US production, adding to the American trade balance. Is there any chance that Donald Trump will negotiate with Europe? I think it's extremely unlikely. Ford is already aware it's going to go bankrupt in Europe. Ford's union said that's going to happen, right? Ford already is shutting down factories in Europe. There's no car manufacturers in America that are selling significant numbers of cars in Europe. Whatever cars they're selling now, the numbers are shrinking. And they already know it. The truth is Ford and General Motors, Chevy, anyone else selling, American car brands selling cars in Europe, there's no way they think they're going to be selling significant numbers of cars in 5 years from now. They're all planning for basically to exit Europe. Looking at the numbers, looking at the data, it's really irrelevant. I mean, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump would be well aware of the fact that this really won't have much of an impact on American companies if Europe was to put an equal 25% tariff. First of all, that's only an increase of 15% because they're already paying 10%. So a 15% tariff on a pretty small number of cars that America is sending to Europe, it's really not going to have barely any effect on the American automotive industry. So can Europe negotiate? I highly, highly doubt it. But will they try other angles? Of course, Europe will say, well, you Americans sell all these things, Twinkies in Europe. You sell us junk food. You sell us lollies. We're going to tariff those. We'll tariff this. We'll tariff that. I'm sure they'll make all these different threats because they've got no choice because Europe is screwed.